Gary Winters asks, can we convince the Hollywood filmmakers to quit making movies involving anything about Vietnam? You had the war, you hated the war, and you hated us vets. Enough cashing in on our misery. BJ Gun Grabbers, Tarantino and his ilk quit making super violent 10,000 gunshot per minute movies. Again, quit cashing in. And I'm sorry, it was B. And C, when will gun grabbers become truck, ball, bat, knife, opioid grabbers? Yeah, that's, I'm with you. Gary, I basically go through that entire litany pretty much every day, so let's just break it down. ABC. Quit making movies about Vietnam. Yes. The people that have made movies about Vietnam have been very anti-war people. They're extraordinarily left-leaning people. Oliver Stone is the first one to come to mind with Platoon. Oliver Stone made JFK, which is the largest collection of lies and proven falsehoods that I've ever seen. But most people don't ever read history, and so most people think that, you know, that that what Oliver Stone fantasized about in JFK is true, and it's not true. And the war didn't go the way that it was portrayed in Apocalypse Now, and it didn't go the way it was portrayed in Platoon either. These were not the standard experience of men out there in that war. I thought that Mel Gibson's We Were Soldiers, which is set right at the very beginning of the Vietnam War, I thought that was a very good representation of what that conflict was, but it wasn't a typical confrontation. It was a big gunfight out in the highlands, nothing like slogging through the jungles and sleeping in the rain and all the rest of it. And Gary, there's a lot of us out there that never bought that view of Vietnam, the war, or the veterans. As many of us have known Vietnam veterans, and it's certainly the way that people like you were treated is the greatest disgrace I've seen during my lifetime. I was very young when it happened. I was, probably 13, I think, when the war ended. And yeah, I wish they'd just stop. I'd like to see some real movies made about the war. I'd like to see movies. I'll tell you what movie I would like to see made very much is a book called Chicken Hawk. Chicken Hawk is about helicopter pilots in Vietnam, and he got the name from saying, I go out on these missions, and part of me just wants to go out there and tear things up, and another part of me is just absolutely terrified. I don't know whether I'm a chicken or a hawk. And his friend said, "You're a chicken hawk," and it's a great book. It's a terrific book, and it really, I thought, it seemed to me anyway, treated the whole thing very fairly. So there are some stories out there, and we should be telling more of them. Because I agree, and it's not just Vietnam. Needless to say, the way they portray Iraq, Afghanistan, as a general rule, is just designed to make soldiers look like psychopaths or idiots who have been, coerced into the Halliburton death machine. So I'm with you on that one, buddy. B, enough cashing in on gun grabbers like Tarantino and his ilk. Jamie Foxx, as I've said many times, made right after, I think it was Sandy Hook shooting, he made a anti-gun violence video with a bunch of other actors. And I said, while it was playing, Django Unchained was running in theaters. He was gunning down 30 people in that movie. Yeah. And you can, you can't go back and change time, but you can say, hey, Jamie, if I was at a press conference or something like that, you said you're so strongly against gun violence. So would you sign a pledge saying that you're never going to hold a gun in a movie ever again, and you'll never be in a movie where a gun is used? Can you just go ahead and promise that now, please? What do you think they'll say, Gary? I don't know what to say about that. It's just plain. It's just awful and evil. And we could go round and round with this all day, and I just don't have anything to add, at least not at the moment. So I'm with you on that one too. And then again, quit cashing in on when will gun grabbers become truck, ball, bat, knife, opioid grabbers? Never, Gary. It's never going to happen. There's a lot to be said about that. I said on the Nexus report yesterday, you're not going to hear any calls for banning trucks from New York City. And the reason is because if you ask people to ban trucks, they'd say the truck didn't kill the guy driving the truck killed the guy. To which I would reply, yes, precisely correct. One of my favorite and most clarifying things I'd ever seen was a 4-panel cartoon, and it was basically two men standing over a body. And I think it was something to the effect of, the first panel, the guy stands there and the guy says, "You just choked that man to death. What's the matter with you?" And the second one, he says, "You just stabbed that man to death. What's the matter with you?" And in the third one, he says, "You just crushed that man to death or ran over him or whatever. What's the matter with you?" And in the fourth one, he says, "You just shot that man to death. We have to get rid of all the guns." And that's pretty much it, right? And the reason, this I know something about, Gary, the reason that they're never going to stop doing it is because this is actually pretty interesting. So if you're going to pay attention anytime tonight, I guess this will be the time. The entire idea of leftism is predicated on the idea that people can be perfectible, that people will do for each other as much work as they will do for themselves. And no matter how much evidence you throw on the table, they believe in this and they never, ever, ever are going to give it up. And so when somebody murders somebody, that's evidence that people are not all like them. In fact, that most people are not like them. And so if they were to simply admit that the Las Vegas shooting was the result of a guy who just plain was just broken, and he didn't even have to have a motive. He just did it. And there's nothing you can do about it. That negates the entire leftist message, because when you get really right down to it, certainly what the Bolsheviks were saying, because I'm still reading Gulag Archipelago, the people that actually enforced the rules in the gulags were criminals, rapists and thieves and murderers. They were put in there with the political prisoners, with the 58s, and they basically terrorized them because they had nothing to lose. But here's the interesting point. The communist government looked at thieves, which we'll just call a generic term for all of these lifelong murderers. They looked at them as essentially friendly social elements. So they got much better treatment than the politicals. They basically said, well, thieves are just stealing from the rich and and giving to the poor. Well, half right. And so they're essentially they're socially friendly members in the class struggle. And that's basically what they believed. For the first 20 years, they believed that if you take a criminal and you put him in a work camp and he learns the value of hard work, he'll become a model Soviet citizen. He'll become a new Soviet man. He'll go out there and work in the factory and do everything he's supposed to do. And no. So people don't want to be told their whole worldview is wrong. So if you're the kind of person that believes that everything that people do is a result of the society around them and the societal pressures that push them into it, then you essentially believe that people are robots and that they're that easily programmable. And so if that theory of the world is true, it's clearly not, but if they believe it's true, then all you have to do is eliminate the guns and you eliminate the murder, because a gun is something you can ban, and insanity isn't. And even then, they still try to ban insanity, right? I mean, what else would you call a sign that says this is a gun-free zone? What would you say about that? Colleges are gun-free zones. What they're really saying is don't murder anybody here. You're not allowed to murder people here. This is a murder-free zone. The whole country's a murder-free zone. And the kind of people that are going to shoot up 60 people are not the kind of people that are going to be deterred by a sign on the wall saying, if every room in the hotel had a little placard beside the window that says, "Do not open fire on bystanders across the street," there are people that think that this would work. And they must think that because they're certainly pushing the gun-free zone things. So what difference does it make? It's the same theory, right? These are the people that believe that, that all we have to do to eliminate rape is to teach little boys how dangerous they are and what potential rapists they all are. And that way you don't have any defective people and you don't have any holes in your little theory, which has killed 150 million people. So yeah, a gun is something you throw into a volcano, and they think that makes the problem go away. And I think it makes the problem worse. And the proof of this, by the way, is that we didn't have these kind of mass shootings in the 50s. And the first one was in, I want to say in the 60s, or early 60s or late 50s, the University of Texas shooting where a guy, former Marine, I think, went up and, let's just call him an ex-Marine. And he went up to the top of the bell tower at University of Texas, Austin, I think, and opened fire, and he was a crack shot, and he killed 22 people, something like that. He had an enormous brain tumor, so I think he probably gets a pass, at least in terms of motivation is concerned, not in terms of what he did. But these are a relatively modern phenomenon. I mean, Columbine, I remember very well. What was that, 93 something? No, later than that, much later. 97, somewhere in there. So what's different? There used to be guns everywhere. You walk into a hardware store and buy whatever gun you want. You just walk right out of there with it. And there were high schools and colleges had shooting teams down in the basement. And there wasn't a boy in America who didn't have a Daisy air rifle or want one or the Red Ryder, air BB gun. But you got to be careful with those because you shoot your eye out. So if everything, and by the way, all the shows on TV were like Gunsmoke. I mean, just think of it, Gunsmoke. That was the name of the show, and Dragnet, and guns everywhere. And we didn't have these mass shootings. And what we do have now is we have 24-hour glorification of murder, and we have movies that are violence porn. And they're beautifully made. They're incredibly well made. The shootout sequence in the first Matrix movie is just a fantastic, unbelievable piece of art. But it's very, very bad. And bad for you, I mean. And by the way, if you want to know what has changed, you just might want to take yourself over to YouTube and look up Best Kills Grand Theft Auto 5. Grand Theft Auto is an astonishingly well-made game in terms, it's probably the most realistic game I've ever seen. But essentially in Grand Theft Auto, you get plunked down in South Central LA or whatever, and you just go around and shoot people. You run them over with cars, and you just do whatever you damn well want to. It's a world where there's no restrictions on you. And if you get killed, you just reboot. You just respawn. You just do it again. Look at what happens in Grand Theft Auto 5. Look at what they're putting online. It's nothing but throat cutting and execution style murders and people being thrown off a cliff and all the rest of it. And these people are not just watching that; they're doing it. They're playing it. They're making that decision. A bunch of hostages are kneeling with their hands behind their back, and this kid playing the game was probably pretty young, with a little controller instead of the mouse and the keyboard, and he just goes down the line, boom, 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 shoots them all in the back of the head. And so, where are they going to get? Where are they going to get the correction and the instruction here? Who's going to teach him the way Phil Trick taught me and many other people in his life, and everybody here has got their story of who's going to step in and say, no, that's wrong, and it's wrong, and don't do that. I don't see any positive influences in games like Grand Theft Auto. There's very few in Star Citizen that I can see. So that's what I want to be. I want to see if a positive influence inside the game can modify the behavior of people playing the game. That's ultimately what I'm trying to do. I want to see if you can provide an example of what this country is, an example of kindness and strength combined, and see if you can modify the behavior of people playing the game so that they make different decisions. And I think that's an interesting challenge. Let's see here.